Religion, ethics, and altruism. People throughout the world define themselves in terms of religion: Muslims, Protestants, Methodists, Unitarians, Jews, Catholics, Mormons, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, and so on. Many others who don't have a religious affiliation are spiritual people who believe in forces that transcend the physical laws of nature. Like social class, religion can shape almost every facet of social life, ranging from moral beliefs to marriage partners. The world's major religions emphasize compassion, altruism, and treating others, even strangers and adversaries, with kindness. This conduct is seen in such religious practices as tithing and tending to those who suffer, and in moral codes such as the Golden Rule, treating others as we would like to be treated ourselves. Table 14.1. The Golden Rule is demonstrated in the texts of the major religions, which encourage a pro-social stance toward others through fables and time-honored passages. Admittedly, many of the world's religions also include stories of taking revenge, putting people to death for seemingly trivial offenses, and treating non-believers in cruel ways. Still, these troublesome elements aside, all religions do stress compassion and the need to treat others, at least some others, well. Does exposure to religious concepts make people more pro-social? Initial studies by Ara Noranzayan and Azim Sharif suggest so, 2008. In one study, participants were shown sequences of 5 words, randomly arranged, and asked to generate sentences using 4 of these 5 words. In a religion prime condition, the 5 words always included at least one word with religious meaning, such as spirit, divine, God, sacred, or prophet. For example, in this condition participants might read, "Felt she eradicate the spirit," and create the sentence, "She felt the spirit." In a neutral prime condition, participants did the same task of unscrambling sentences, but none of the words had religious meaning. After this task, participants in both conditions then received 10 Canadian dollars and were asked to give some amount away to a stranger. Figure 14.4 shows the powerful effect of being primed by religious concepts like divine or sacred. Participants in the neutral prime condition were more than twice as likely to give nothing to a stranger, compared with those in the religion prime condition, 36% versus 16%. By contrast, people who were primed with religious concepts were more than 4 times as likely to treat a stranger as an equal by giving half of the money to the stranger, 52% versus 12%. Subsequent studies, inspired by this work, have shown that different kinds of religious priming, reporting on personal religious beliefs, reading passages from religious texts, hearing the Islamic call to prayer in the background, even standing near religious buildings, also increase pro-social behaviors of different kinds. Sharif et al., 2015. Figure 14.4, Religion and Altruism. As this study showed, being primed with religious concepts leads to greater generosity. It's a side-by-side bar graph, and on the x-axis, the categories are about content primed within sentence. One category is religion prime, the other category is neutral prime, and on the y-axis is the proportion of participants making gift to stranger, from 0 to 60%, and the 2 sets of bars are give nothing or give half. And in the religion prime, you can see that more people gave half, about 50%, than gave nothing, only about 18% gave nothing. In the neutral prime, you can see that about 35% gave nothing, and only about 12% gave half. So in the religion prime, way more people, almost 2/3 more people gave half than nothing, but in the neutral prime, almost 2/3 more people gave nothing than half. So the religious prime has greatly increased the altruism in giving. Table 14.1, the Golden Rule across cultures and religions. Matthew 7:12, in everything therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. for this is the law and the prophets. Sextus the Pythagorean, what you wish your neighbors to be to you, you will also be to them. Buddhism, putting oneself in the place of another, one shouldn't kill nor cause another to kill. Tibetan Buddhism, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Dalai Lama. Hinduism, one should never do that to another which one regards as injurious to one's own self. Muhammad, hurt no one so that no one may hurt you. Taoism, he is kind to the kind. He is also kind to the unkind. What about secular, non-religious ideas related to kindness and virtue? Of the kind one might learn about from parents, hear about in school, or read about in philosophy or psychology, or even in this chapter. Sharif and Norin Zayn examined whether secular, non-religious concepts related to kindness and ethical behavior generate similar levels of generosity. 2007. In what they called a civic condition, participants unscrambled sentences that included words related to such secular institutions and ideas that build more cooperative societies, such as civic, jury, court, police, and contract. These words also generated high levels of generosity in the economic game, as much generosity, in fact, as the religious words prompted. It seems that the emphasis on fairness and cooperation and equality, seen in both religious traditions and secular treatments of ethics, can do a great deal to elicit pro-social behavior. Shinobu Kitayama and his colleagues have gathered evidence showing that the sense of being watched, so prominent in religions of different kinds, increases altruism. In fact, so powerful is this effect that it can be achieved by simply seeing 3 dots arranged to look like the eyes and mouth of a human face. Seeing this arrangement of dots evokes the sense that someone is looking at you and, the reasoning goes, triggers more cooperative behavior. In the relevant study, participants played the dictator game. They were given a sum of money and asked to write down on a sheet of paper the amount they wanted to give to a stranger. 2009. On the paper, they saw one of 2 sets of dots, shown in figure 14.5. In one condition, participants saw the pattern of 3 dots evocative of the human face, the pattern on the left. In a second condition, participants saw the same dots but configured upside down, the pattern on the right. When presented with the non-face dots on the response sheet, 40% of the participants decided to keep all the money for themselves. This selfish tendency dropped to 25% when the dots representing the face were on the response sheet. Figure 14.5, being watched. A simple triangular arrangement of dots reminiscent of the human face, 3 dots on the left, is associated with a sense of being observed and encourages cooperation, more than a triangular arrangement that does not evoke the human face, 3 dots to the right. So the 3 dots to the left, it's like 2 eyes, like horizontally on a plane, and then 1 dot in the middle under it, like a nose or a mouth. And the other one is swapped, so the 1 dot is on the top on a plane, and then the second 2 dots, spaced equally under it, are on a plane, so it's not like a human face. Box 14.3, focus on culture. Pro-social behavior and the sense of being watched. Common to many religions is the idea that God is watching over people as they carry on with their mundane lives on earth. The Greeks believed that their gods guided their everyday actions. The same is true for many Christians today, who feel they are being watched by Jesus. And in many religions, this idea of being observed translates directly into religious iconography and architecture. For example, if you travel to Nepal and visit its temples, such as the 5th century BCE temple, Swaya Mumbanta, you'll have the distinct impression of being watched because of the prominence of the eyes on the surface. You might have a similar experience when visiting the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's famous painted ceiling in the Vatican in Rome. There, if you look up into the center of the ceiling, you'll see God looking down upon Adam and Eve in one of the best-known works of art from the Renaissance. The Swayambhuta Temple. The eyes painted at the top of the temple give visitors the feeling they're being watched. So it's showing a picture of the temple from the outside. Evolution and altruism. Few behaviors are more difficult to explain from an evolutionary perspective than altruism. Natural selection favors behaviors that increase the likelihood of survival and reproduction. Altruistic behavior, by its very nature, is costly. It devotes precious resources to others that could be used for oneself or one's genetic relatives. The costs of altruism can even include the ultimate sacrifice, as when people risk their lives to save the lives of friends or total strangers. How, then, have evolutionary theorists accounted for altruistic behavior? Two evolutionary explanations have been offered: kin selection and reciprocity. Kin selection. Kin selection is an evolutionary strategy that favors behaviors that increase the chance of survival of genetic relatives. 1964. From the perspective of kin selection, people should be more likely to help those who share more of their genes, for example, by helping siblings more than first cousins more than second cousins, and so on. By helping relatives survive, people help their own genes pass to future generations. Kin selection, an evolutionary strategy that favors the reproductive success of one's genetic relatives, even at a cost to one's own survival and reproduction. A chicken is only an egg's way of making another egg. Samuel Butler, Life and Habit. An organism is a gene's way of making another gene. Richard Dawkins. In keeping with kin selection theory, studies of several non-human species find that helping is more likely to be directed toward kin than non-kin. Mockingbirds feed their own hungry nestlings first, and then will feed hungry nestlings that are not their own, but that are more closely related to them than other hungry nestlings. 1988. Ground squirrels, when sensing that a predatory coyote or weasel is in the vicinity, are more likely to emit alarm calls, thus putting themselves in danger, to warn a genetic relative or a squirrel they have lived with, than to warn unrelated squirrels or squirrels from other areas. In humans, genetic relatedness influences helping behavior as well. Across many cultures, people report receiving more help from close kin than from more distant relatives or non-relatives. When hypothetical situations are described to them, people report being more willing to help close relatives, especially those young enough to have children, than to help more distantly related people or strangers. In a study of kidney donations, donors were about 3 times as likely to engage in this altruistic act for a relative, 73%, than for non-relatives, 27%. In a puzzle task that required cooperation, identical twins, who shared all their genes, were found to cooperate about twice as often, 94%, as fraternal twins, 46%, who share only half of their genes. Reciprocity. How would an evolutionary account make sense of helping non-kin? We often go to great lengths to help friends. We give them money, let them sleep at our apartment and eat out of our refrigerator, help them move, and sometimes even risk our lives for them. Even more compelling, perhaps, is how often we help total strangers. People will dive into icy waters to save people they've never met, donate money anonymously to charities, and engage in all sorts of more ordinary, less costly behaviors, such as giving up a seat on a bus or taking the time to help someone cross a street. Such actions can be accounted for in part by reciprocity and cooperation, which form the basis of the second major evolutionary explanation for altruism. In traditional, pre-literate societies, individuals living in groups were best able to survive when they cooperated with one another. To explain how cooperation evolved, evolutionary theorists generally use the concept of reciprocal altruism, helping other people with the expectation that they'll help in return at some other time. Cooperation among non-kin provides many benefits that increase the chances of survival and reproduction for all parties. Reciprocal altruism reduces the likelihood of dangerous conflict, helps overcome problems arising from scarce resources, and offers a basis for people to form alliances and constrain more dominant individuals. It looks like this would later translate into exchange relationships. There's some evidence in non-human species for the mutual helping that's the essence of reciprocal altruism. Vampire bats need blood meals to survive and may starve to death if they don't have a blood meal after 60 hours. Researchers have found that satiated bats will regurgitate blood to feed bats that have given to them in the past, but won't make a donation to a bat that hasn't been a donor itself. In his observations of chimpanzees and bonobos, Franz de Waal has found that primates are disposed to share food with other primates who share with them, to look after each other's offspring, and to systematically groom other primates who have groomed them earlier. Reciprocal altruism, helping others with the expectation that they will probably return the favor in the future. Reciprocal altruism, vampire bats will regurgitate blood to feed starving bats that have given blood to them in the past, but they will not give blood to bats that haven't helped them in the past. Thus, reciprocally altruistic behavior is observed in non-human species as well as in humans. The impulse to reciprocate acts of generosity is a likely human universal. In hunter-gatherer societies around the world, meat gained from hunts is carefully divided up and shared with others on the assumption that present acts of generosity will be paid back at some later date. In studies using games where players can either cooperate or compete with one another, people are more likely to seek out and cooperate with individuals who have cooperated on the previous round of the game. Perhaps an even more dramatic illustration of our tendency to reciprocate is the following experiment. Researchers mailed Christmas cards to numerous complete strangers. About 20% reciprocated by sending their own Christmas cards back to the senders whom they had never met. 1976. Either the participants had too few friends to accommodate the stacks of Christmas cards they bought, or they felt compelled by the norm of reciprocity to respond with a Christmas card to the sender. Adam Grant and Francisca Gino have made the case that expressions of gratitude act as social rewards and are a powerful trigger of subsequent cooperation, which fits the reciprocal altruism thesis. More specifically, they propose that an act of appreciation functions like a gift. The recipient feels socially valued. Feeling rewarded, the recipient should be more inclined to reciprocate and behave altruistically. In one relevant study, participants helped an experimenter edit a letter online. 2010. In the gratitude condition, participants were thanked via email. In the control condition, participants received a polite message of equal length, but without a note of thanks. When asked if they would help the experimenter edit a second letter, those who were thanked responded affirmatively 66% of the time, compared with 32% in the control condition. Food sharing. In cultures around the world, the sharing of food is a way that people build and maintain cooperative relationships. These women in China share a lunch communally and enjoy the delights of such exchange. So they're sitting together eating and they look very cute and happy. Looking back, altruistic tendencies are behaviors that benefit others. People may act altruistically for selfish motives, such as reducing distress or gaining social rewards, but some acts of altruism are based on a more selfless state of empathic concern. Situational determinants influence whether or not people help others. The presence of bystanders may lead to a diffusion of responsibility in which everyone assumes that someone else will help. People are more likely to help similar others. Construal processes also influence helping. Pluralistic ignorance can lead people to be less likely to help because they're not sure what's going on. It's ambiguous. People are more likely to help if they're from rural rather than urban settings or from lower rather than upper class backgrounds. Two evolutionary concepts that can account for the existence of altruism are kin selection and reciprocity. Cooperation. Cooperating with others is part of our evolutionary heritage. The profound vulnerability and dependence of our offspring, who have a long period of complete reliance on adults for food and protection, required cooperative childcare. Both parents shared the burdens of raising children who were entirely dependent on them. From archaeological studies of the bones of animals our hominid predecessors killed for food, we know that early humans hunted in cooperative groups. The inclination to cooperate for common goals is almost a defining attribute of humans. One of the most striking aspects of human relations is how quickly adversarial relationships can become cooperative, and vice versa. In World War II, for example, the mortal enemies of the United States were the Germans and Japanese. Shortly after the end of the war, the United States became strong allies with these former enemies. During the Rwandan genocide, Hutus sought to annihilate Tutsis. Since then, the two groups have become more collaborative. It's an important lesson of history, how readily people shift from competition and aggression to cooperation. The prisoner's dilemma. Core principles that account for how and why humans cooperate have been examined through the use of an experimental paradigm known as the prisoner's dilemma, often structured as a type of economic game. Imagine being ushered into a small cubicle. The experimenter tells you there's another participant, whom you'll never meet, in a cubicle nearby. Both you and the other participant are required to make a simple decision. Independently, you must choose to either cooperate with each other, do what will benefit both of you, or defect, do what will disproportionately benefit only you. The compensation you receive will depend on the choices you make. If both of you cooperate, you'll each receive $5. If both of you defect, you'll each get $2. If one cooperates and the other defects, the defector will receive $8 and the cooperator will not receive anything. The experimenter says you'll be paid as soon as each of you makes your choice and reiterates that you and the other person will never meet. What do you do? To maximize your own self-interest, the best or rational choice is to defect. Whatever your partner does, you make more money by defecting than by cooperating. To see this, consult a summary of payoffs presented in Figure 14.6. If your partner cooperates, you receive $8 by defecting, but only $5 by cooperating. If your partner defects, you receive $2 by defecting and nothing by cooperating. Defection thus dominates cooperation, so why not defect? Here's the catch. If both players reason this way and choose to defect, they both receive only $2 rather than the $5 that would be theirs through mutual cooperation. The best choice for each person, defection, is a terrible choice from the standpoint of the two people in combination. On the surface, the prisoner's dilemma game seems to hold little promise for teaching anything significant about real human interaction. Unlike many real-world situations, the game offers no range of cooperative to competitive behaviors to choose from. Instead, there are only two behaviors, cooperate or defect. In addition, participants aren't allowed to discuss the choices beforehand, and they are never permitted to explain or justify them afterward. Overall, it seems too limited, too artificial, to demonstrate anything significant about real-world cooperation and competition. Looks may be deceiving, however. As simple as the prisoner's dilemma seems, it nevertheless captures the essential features of many significant situations in life. Let's consider a real-world analog. India and Pakistan have been engaged in an arms race for decades. Like nearly all such struggles, the contest is ultimately futile because its structure is that of the prisoner's dilemma. Each country must decide whether to spend more money on armaments or to stop spending on more arms and enjoy a significant economic peace dividend, as the United States did following the breakup of the Soviet Union. However, regardless of what the other does, it's better to acquire more arms. In this case, acquiring more arms is akin to choosing to defect in the prisoner's dilemma. If India freezes its acquisition of weapons, Pakistan can achieve an edge by spending more. If India builds up its arsenal, Pakistan has to spend more to avoid vulnerability. Nonetheless, because the new weapons systems developed by one side are quickly matched by the other, the net effect is waste. The two countries pay dearly for a military balance that was attainable for less expense. Thus, although the prisoner's dilemma may seem like a sterile and artificial paradigm on the surface, it captures many difficult real-world choices between cooperation and competition. Thousands of studies using the prisoner's dilemma game have yielded some valuable insights about how people make these difficult choices, illuminating why people or groups or countries would be likely to defect or cooperate, and suggesting what might be done to foster cooperative relations. Prisoner's dilemma, a situation involving payoffs to two people who must decide whether to cooperate or defect. In the end, trust and cooperation lead to higher joint payoffs than mistrust and defection. Cooperation between wartime enemies. During World War I, instances of cooperation took place between enemy soldiers, as during this informal Christmas truce in 1914, soldiers from both sides emerged from their trenches and fraternized in no man's land. This lithograph was published in 1915. So you can see a little Christmas tree and the men standing around and shaking hands and smiling. Figure 14.6, the payoff matrix for the prisoner's dilemma game. Okay, so it's a two-way table. Okay, so then the columns are your partner, they can either cooperate or defect, and the rows are you can either cooperate or defect. So when you both cooperate, you both get $5. When both of you defect, you both get $2. And when one of you defects, you get $8 if the other person cooperates. Developing cooperative relationships. Cooperation can emerge between the most violent of enemies and in the most extreme circumstances. Here, members of two rival gangs in El Salvador, MS 13 and 18th Street, stand next to each other in a spirit of cooperation, created by a truce signed a year earlier. So you can see two gang members standing side by side with their arms folded, both leaning on the same, wall post. Box 14.4, focus on neuroscience. The cooperative brain. Cooperation is vital to human survival, but as a social strategy, it can incur certain costs. For example, when we cooperate, we also risk being exploited by others. In addition, the rewards of cooperation will often be enjoyed much later, as when we cooperate with colleagues on a long-term project. James Rilling and his colleagues have found that the brain may be wired to enable cooperation in the face of these kinds of uncertainty, 2002. They have shown that during acts of cooperation, our brain fires as if we are receiving rewards. In their study, 36 women played an online version of Prisoner's Dilemma with another person. Using fMRI technology, the researchers scanned the brains of the participating women when they cooperated with the online stranger, which was their most common choice. They found that reward-related regions of the brain, the nucleus accumbens, ventral caudate, and ventromedial orbitofrontal cortex, exhibited increased activation when the women cooperated. These brain regions are rich in dopamine receptors and are activated by all sorts of rewards, such as sweet tastes, pleasant smells, pictures of tropical vacations, and pleasing touches. Cooperation, it seems, is inherently rewarding. Situational determinants of cooperation. The Prisoner's Dilemma game sets up the simplest of situations. Participants are involved in just one round with someone they don't know or even see. Of course, our social lives are much more complex. In real life, we often interact repeatedly over time with certain people, for example, in our careers or in our personal relationships. Are we more cooperative when we interact repeatedly with the same person, compared with a one-shot interaction? Indeed, we are. David Rand and Martin Nowak have reviewed numerous studies that varied the number of rounds two people played the prisoner's dilemma game. The evidence is clear. As the likelihood of interacting with someone in the future rises, we become more cooperative. 2013. In real life, we also interact with people face to face, allowing us access to various cues about them. Are we more cooperative with people who behave or look a certain way? Indeed we are, and for sensible reasons. A variety of studies suggest that we study others' nonverbal behavior in search of cues that signal that that individual is likely to cooperate, and once those cues are detected, they trigger cooperation on our part in turn. For example, in situations like the prisoner's dilemma game, people are more likely to cooperate with another person who smiles in a friendly fashion, laughs warmly, has a trustworthy-looking face, listens to others attentively, and has a physical appearance that resembles their own appearance. In a similar vein, people also trust and devote resources to other individuals who cooperate quickly and reflexively, and in ways that seem spontaneous rather than calculated and strategic. In daily life, we also tend to interact with people we know and often whose reputations we know from others.